Tell me, this was the second session where this textalyzer bill has been introduced.
Right.
It seems to me, and I saw the video of the news conference that happened last week in April, I believe.
Right.
It seems like there's momentum building for this, no?
Well, there is. It's a very good bill, and it's a very good method that if someone is involved in an accident, the police should have the ability to find out whether or not that person was on the cell phone.
Just to step back a little bit, talk to me about the seriousness of the problem of distracted driving.
Yeah, distracted driving has now been expanded with cell phones, especially with people texting. The number of incidents have gone up astronomically over the last couple of years as more people, unfortunately, are texting while they're driving. That causes distraction and it causes some very serious accidents, accidents involving death, serious injury, and the like. So what you want to do is you want to send a very clear message that this is not permissible activity, and if somebody is involved in an accident, it would give the police the ability to go check the phone to see whether or not the person has been texting.
One of the things that sticks out to me about this bill is you're a supporter, Senator Savino is a supporter.
Right.
In the Assembly, it is Assemblyman Ortiz, who is the Assistant Speaker, a Democrat from downstate.
Right.
So it does seem to have a bipartisan nature to it, which we don't see for everything.
Well, you don't see for everything. It has a lot of bipartisan support. It has a lot of geographic support. So me being from Western New York, Buffalo area, senators being from downstate and Staten Island and upstate also, other part of the state, an assemblyman from New York City. So it has support both across party lines, but more importantly, across geographical boundaries. So it does have wide breadth of support all throughout the state.
You know what the criticism of this is, that it could be perceived as an invasion of privacy. You're an attorney. Do you believe this would be upheld constitutionally?
Well, that's why it's just a perception, because the device does not go into, and just so you know, I mean, if the device was trolling through your information, I would not be in support of it. But all the device does is determine were you texting or not. It doesn't look at who your contacts are. It doesn't look at the content of what was being said, if anything was being said. It's were you on the device or not. And then if you wanted to go further, then you would need a warrant just like in any other circumstances. But I don't believe that there's any invasion of privacy in this particular situation, just because the nature of the device doesn't look at your information.
It's been compared to a breathalyzer. That's why it's called a textalyzer.
Right.
When an officer administers a breathalyzer, they have some type of suspicion or reason to do
Right.
it. This would be used kind of broadly for everyone without any suspicion from the officer. Shouldn't the officer have some reason to want to look at your phone before doing so?
Well, there's a much bigger difference, and you shouldn't be confused by the name. Before a police officer can administer a breathalyzer, normally at the scene they will use something called an alcohol sensor, which determines whether you have alcohol or not. Then if that's positive, then they take the next step, which is the breathalyzer. So they already would have probable cause. Again, this is more akin to the device just seeing yes or no. Are you texting or not? Is there alcohol or not? It's not getting into the nitty-gritty, and that's why I don't think that this is a problem, because you're not looking at the actual content. You're not going that far with this particular device.
What about safeguards for something like this being abused? Because people are always kind of suspicious of something like this, especially when you talk about a cell phone. And I'm sure you know the Supreme Court has ruled that your cell phone has a lot of protections because of all that we have on them now.
Right.
What type of safeguards are there to make sure this isn't abused?
Well, the device just says whether you are using it or not. If the police wanted to get more information, they would then have to get a warrant. This is just a very threshold inquiry. If you're in an accident, were you texting or not? That's all it does. It doesn't look at who you were texting with, if you were texting, doesn't look at what you were saying, doesn't look at how long the conversation lasted, doesn't look at the content. It's were you texting or not? And that's all it does. So I don't think that there's an issue of someone getting into your context, getting into your content of what's on your phone. That's not what this is all about. This is if you're in an accident, were you on the phone texting or not?
How much of a deterrent do you think this could be for people when they choose whether or not to use that phone while driving?
Well, I don't know, because I would have thought right now, with all the laws that we have against texting and driving, with the stops on the throughway, setting up text stops, that would have served as an avenue for people to do it. But people still text and drive. So this is just another tool in the toolbox, so to speak, to let people know that if you're involved in an accident and you're texting, that's not a good thing. And someone's going to be able to determine whether you were texting at the time of the accident. So I think it'll be another thing that we can use to deter this, but a lot more has to be done. I don't know what the answer is to stop people from texting while they're driving. I don't know what the answer is to stop people from being on their phones as opposed to hands-free. I mean, you can just driving over here this morning, I saw a number of people with their hand by their ear on their phone, obviously doing what you're not allowed to do. So, what we can do as lawmakers, what I can do as a senator, is to try to just educate the public and to just give, in this particular case, law enforcement, that type of tool that if you're texting while you're in an accident, that's not a good thing for you.
When you look at the surveys of how often distracted driving has happened, AT&T commissioned a scientific survey, which I'm using in the story. 95% of people say texting while driving is a bad thing.
Right.
Yet 71% admit
Right.
to doing it.
Right.
It seems so pervasive.
Right. It's a question of changing behaviors. Just because you know it's not a good thing doesn't mean that you practice what you preach. In many avenues, we should all be better at practicing what we preach. And again, the problem is really to be able to change behaviors, especially with the advent in the last several years and actually over the last decade of the improved technology with phones and with phones that text and everything else that can be done. There's just a lot more education of our public that we need to do.
Finally, New York would be the first state to allow something like this. What are the chances this passes?
Very good, because there's no denying, as you cited earlier, these statistics, that even though people don't think that you should text and drive, a lot of people do it. So the knowledge point is that people know it's bad. So there's a lot of public support for this type of legislation. And as we talked about earlier, it has a lot of support from upstate, from downstate, from Republicans, from Democrats, all across the spectrum of New York State. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to get it done in this session.